Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier and this is Ship Updates. Now, the elusive Mantis. I've waited a while to try and record this episode because I was hoping that we were going to get more, that we were going to get some more substance. I've been kind of watching Reddit and watching, the RSI page very carefully, hoping to see something pop up, but I really haven't seen anything. So we're going to kind of go with what we got, and we're going to talk about this ship. Now, yesterday I did a whole episode talking specifically about the interdiction bubble mechanic, my point of view on it, the challenges that I think it's going to face, and what I think is the likely solution that CIG is going to take. And, so I'm going to kind of set that aside, and I'm going to kind of look at the core idea behind the ship itself, give you my impression, my thoughts of the ship, and, kind of a guesstimate as to where the price on this thing is going to land, and just kind of give you what I like, what I don't like, my concerns. So if you're thinking about getting this ship, if you're a pirate, it's probably something that you're thinking very seriously about, and just so you have a different point of view to take into account when you're thinking about buying this ship. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, first of all, most of you that know me know that I'm really not somebody who lingers too much on appearance. So the look of the ship, I think, is totally fine. In fact, I think it was on Reddit that someone kind of noted that this kind of looked like images of the Enterprise to a certain degree from the front, and certainly with those nacelles and the blue trails coming out of them and the red on the front, I totally see that. And but I think if it is intentional, it's kind of it's not something really that I would ever say was copied, and more something that's kind of like a tip of the hat. There are some ships that I would say are probably a little too much of a tip of the hat to something else, but this ship definitely, I would say, is just that. If it is intentional, it is that right touch. It is a good compromise between what the original looks like and what you're trying to create. So, I would grade it in that way as kind of an A+, if that was the intention. I would definitely say that was a good job. But apart from that, the aesthetics generally with ships are secondary to me. It's more about the functionality, what they're supposed to do, and does the artwork compromise its ability to basically do its job in the Star Citizen universe. And you'll note that being an RSI ship, one of the things I also really liked about this was the complete lack of struts in the cockpit, which I don't know, it's early days yet. Maybe these are old images and something like that, but the complete lack of struts, I have to applaud that as well. That's kind of a bold step forward for CIG, because they're usually very rigidly stuck to, the other ships from that manufacturer and the way they work, and sometimes that works to their detriment. Though recently with the mine layer, that kind of looked more like an Anvil ship than an Aegis ship. So if they are kind of breaking away from that rigidity to better serve the function of the ship, then I have to applaud it. I have to say that honestly, from that point of view, I really, really dig this ship. It seems to have kind of artistic integrity, but at the same time, it does more than pay lip service to the functionality within the Star Citizen universe. And I think that that's one of the things that we've noted with many of the more recent ships, is that they're less just, an arbitrary artistic vision, and they're more designed with the Star Citizen universe in mind. So I really do like that. Now, in terms of functionality, what it's supposed to do, of course, it's an interdictor ship. So I've kind of gone with the whole interdictor bubble sphere field. Yesterday talked about it at length, including what I think CIG's likely resolution to that is going to be. Going to be interesting to see if that actually pans out. But the other functionality that I didn't really get into is the fact that it can create a sphere 2,000 meters wide around it, and basically instantly activated, and it kills any quantum drive. Well, it doesn't kill it, like destroy it, but it disables it, doesn't enable it to function within 2,000 meters. So if you're pursuing a ship and you don't want them to quantum out, as long as you stay within 2,000 meters with this bubble activated, they can't quantum out. And since this isn't really all that big of a ship, it looks to be plus or minus, a few feet here or there. It looks to be more or less Cutlass sized, I would say, roughly. So it doesn't look like it's going to be something all that slow. So if you're hoping to stop a much larger vessel, you shouldn't have that much problem pursuing them and then shutting them down. Oddly enough, when I was looking at this, I was thinking, like, geez, this would have made a heck of a variant of the Cutlass, because it almost seems a little bit weird that it's a first flight or like a top tier manufacturer that's making this ship, because this almost seems like this would be something that you would actually see from Drake. And so that choice was a little bit of a head scratcher, but of course, moving to the future, they'll probably give a reason for it. And, obviously the military would have a use for a tool like this. So potentially, this is where it originated, and then it moved out into the civilian market. It's possible. Price-wise, I think that you're probably going to be looking at ballpark $150 to $200 for this ship. It is roughly Terrapin Cutlass sized, so I think that is probably where it's going to fall. I don't think it's going to go over $200, and if it does, we would really have to have a lot more information as to what its capabilities are and what its features are. I did notice that it does appear to be somewhat light on the weaponry, and so hopefully that is matched with, stronger than normal defenses. So obviously, if you're putting out a field like this and you're preventing people from quantuming away, you're very quickly going to make yourself a primary target. So I have to kind of think that if it doesn't really look to have all that much in terms of firepower, I'm guessing that it's probably defensively pretty strong. And, as CIG likes to say, punches above their weight in the defense department. It's going to be a little bit tougher to take down than a Cutlass. So if it kind of follows through with that, then I think functionality wise, in terms of like a pursuit vessel for stopping larger vessels that are carrying cargo or smuggling or something like that, it could very well indeed, just taking the quantum bubble out of it and just going with this field that it projects, that makes it a very interesting ship. And if that's the price point, then that also makes it a very interesting ship and something that will probably be very well received. There's a lot of good things going on here. Now, when I was talking about the whole quantum interdiction field that it generates, the big sphere that it puts out there, I do have some concerns in that department, but overall I am fairly bullish on the ship. I do like the idea. I do like the way that, it adheres to RSI aesthetics, but not at the expense of functionality. And it is a damn good looking ship at the same time. It's something more akin to the recent medical ship that we saw from RSI that will materialize whenever it does. But since this thing is going to be flight ready, I'm fairly excited about it. Now, another upside to this is, of course, in the past we'd heard about distortion relative to the effects that weapons like distortion cannons have on ships. And that isn't something that we've really had a reason to use up until now. So it's probably something that will be experimented with in the future once NPC haulers and things like that turn up. But to have a mechanic like this in the game, some people might be like, oh, well, this is obviously, it's a quote unquote, it's a griefer ship. It's for griefing. It's for ruining my fun. But it's important to have these things in the game early to test them, to see what their uses and abuses are, and to have some real player data to start to balance something like this sooner rather than later. I mean, it's better that this thing shows up now when money doesn't really mean anything versus this showing up when things go live, and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, there's this whole new threat out there, and all of a sudden my money making for real could be impacted by this ship, and we don't know, like, it hasn't really been out in the wild yet, and it hasn't really been tamed. Because as much as game developers like to sometimes believe, and I'm not targeting this at anybody at CIG, because this is all across game development throughout the entire industry. As much as many game developers like to believe they have a pretty good handle on things by the time they get out into the wild, the sad truth is that when you take something out of a small group of people's hands and you spread it out to a much wider group of people, you get a lot of different ideas as to how to use it and sometimes how to abuse it. And so it would benefit from, certainly a mechanic like this would benefit from being in the hands of players at the earliest possible date, so that it can be not just theoretically balanced on paper, but realistically balanced based on real player data. It's important to have a mechanic like this tested as early as possible. So that's another reason why I am fairly bullish about this ship. Now, of course, recently we had found out that ships that were considered interdictors or interceptors, now were, possibly still have a bit of an interdiction effect with distortion weapons, though that remains to be seen. That was kind of a hint that something like this was coming. And so overall, is it something that I would get? And once again, I want to see a price tag. I want to know, and it would probably be more something that I would trade into. You know what I mean? That would be my feeling on the ship. This would be a ship that I would trade into rather than something that I would buy outright. Because while its uses are fairly obvious, especially for someone in a pirate profession, the extent to which it's going to work in the final version of the game when everything counts is still a big question mark. There's a lot of question marks surrounding the interdiction mechanic, and not because CIG isn't doing anything right in that department, but because it once again has not gotten out into the wild and gotten out into the hands of players. And I would be fairly enthusiastic about testing something like this out in the universe. I have to be perfectly honest. So yeah, I'm fairly upbeat on this ship. There are, in the past, there are certain ships, obviously, that I have been quite the opposite on. But this one I really do like. Now, of course, with all, straight to flight ready ships like this, there's always that kind of elephant in the room of, yeah, but what other ship was benched so that this ship could be done? And I kind of say, the Cutlasses probably ate up some of those resources, possibly, though the Cutlasses or the Drake ships generally tend to be worked on in North America, whereas the RSI stuff comes out of the UK. So maybe not, maybe something else, but because of the mechanic that comes attached to it, I am somewhat positively disposed towards this ship. That's kind of my point of view. Once again, I want to see a price. I want it to be a very reasonable price, because obviously this is not a very substantial ship. So just because it has the fancy interdictor mechanic to it, I don't think that's licensed to price this thing in the high 200s or the $300 range. So I have a feeling that if it comes in the 150 to 200 range, considering it's probably a little bit smaller than a Vanguard and obviously not as combat capable, though it does have a very interesting mechanic, I would regard it more Terrapin wise in terms of price would be appropriate. We'll have to wait and see what CIG does, but I like this sort of thing. I like when I get to do a video like this, when I can actually say I like this ship and I like what it represents, and I like the fact that we're getting to test it early. So overall, my feelings towards what little we know of this ship, and emphasis on what little we know about this ship and the mechanics attached to it so far, my immediate reaction towards it is positive, and I would like to know more. So that is my opinion on the Mantis as of right now, prior to getting any real stats and price on this ship. Anyways, that's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.